Good afternoon. I'm Maria Ressa. This is Rappler's coverage of PH Vote, the 2016 elections. We'd like to acknowledge our partners, Globe, 7-Eleven, 7-Election, OLX, Radius, Starbucks, Coca-Cola FEMSA, and McDonald's. Special mention to our advocacy partners working very hard right now over at PPCRV and NAMFREL. If you take a look right now as we go on, there's actually a Comelec live shot that is going on. They're declaring a failure of elections in some of the precincts in the Philippines. Can we listen in? Is that possible? Okay, we're not getting any sound right now. We'll bring you the latest details as soon as we get it. In the meantime, oh, I did try the audio. Why don't I go ahead and update you on the other things that have gone on since we last saw each other. It is day 2 after the Monday elections when we had an overwhelming turnout. 81%, the largest turnout, voter turnout in the Philippines in as long as I can remember, and I've been watching it for 30 years. So here we go. What's up right now? Well, we see if you go to Rappler's live blog page, you can see it. We're live here. There's a slight delay from real time, but you will see all the latest updates as we come on, and you can actually see some of the unofficial results as well as the stories you may have missed while we were sleeping. Let's take a look at the results, which is what everyone is looking for. And just to refresh your memory, here we go. This is the race for the president. It seems all but a foregone conclusion with 95.3% of the precincts reporting as of, let me see, I think we can refresh this so I can give you something that is, there we go. As of 3:58 this afternoon, Rudy Duterte is up at 35%. Seems all but a foregone conclusion. He is the presumptive president. He's gotten 15.8 million votes. Compared to the second, Tamar Rojas, who's gotten 23.5%. You can see here, if you want to see where they got their votes, you can look at the map that we have for you on Rappler. Let's go deeper into the vice presidential race, which is actually where all eyes are focused right now. Take a look. It is a tight race. Soon after the polls closed that evening, Bongbong Marcos took the lead in this, and around 3 a.m. Tuesday morning, Leni Robredo came up and overtook him. But always there's been a very, very slim margin, incredibly tight. As of 3:58 this afternoon, with 95.55% of the precincts reporting, you've got 35.1% of the ballots cast. 13,960,824 for Leni Robredo, the Liberal Party candidate. And we have for Senator Bongbong Marcos, 13,727,796 votes. That gives him 34.6% of the votes. Look at that. 34.6% for Marcos, 35.1% for Leni Robredo. You can also see here the transmission status. It shows you that we're nearly done, but the counting is going to take just a little bit longer. We're going to come back to that and bring you more details as well as the developments over the last few hours with Bongbong Marcos, Miriam Santiago, and Comelec responding to some of these charges. Let's quickly take a look at the senators. Here's the race for the Senate. You see Franklin Drilon, so Joel Villanueva of TESDA had actually been at number 1 right off the gate, and he was there up until yesterday morning. Frank Drilon came in, so you have your first 12 right here. Frank Drilon, Joel Villanueva, Vic Soto, Ping Lacson, Dick Gordon, Juan Mig Zubiri, Manny Pacquiao, Risa Ontiveros, who we spoke with yesterday, Kiko Pangilinan, Win Gatchalian, Ralph Recto, and Laila De Lima. Just below them, so we can see the gap between Laila and Francis Tolentino, who is number 13. So you have your first 12. Number 13, there's a gap between them. Laila De Lima, 13,739,958. Francis Tolentino, 12,469,751. Finally, the party list. And this is an interesting one because you have which are the ones who will get into Congress? Well, it'll be the party list with at least 2% of the ballots cast. So you can see here the top 12. Very interesting to see the list. And you can read more about this at, oh, this is actually our next thing. The partial results. Ako Bicol, here we go. So you can actually see the party list. Ako Bicol leads the party list race. 2 new groups in the top 10. That includes One Pacman and Kabayan with businessman Mikey Romero and lawyer Harry Roque as first nominees. Let's just quickly look at the partial results of the overseas race. That's really important. Right now, it's Duterte and Marcos leading it. They've maintained the lead from the beginning. And just for you, our Rappler Tech team's hard at work along with our editorial team. You can see that we actually created a separate page for the overseas absentee voting results. It is the largest in recent history, actually the largest ever that I can remember. 1.8 million registered voters, and we'll get a sense of how many votes were cast. But you can see here, they cast overwhelmingly for Duterte at 72.5% of the vote. For Ferdinand Marcos, Bongbong Marcos the Jr., 42.2% of the votes for him. Alan Peter Cayetano came in second with 33.2%, and Leni Robredo at third with 19.4%. Please go ahead and take a look, and you can see the overseas absentee ballot there. We've got to take a look at something that has powered all of these, powered elections from the very beginning of the campaign, and that is social media. We've got a story on it. You can see it on your screen. How did the presidential and vice presidential candidates fare on social media? But aside from this, live right now, coming to us from Singapore, we're going to be speaking with Twitter's Rishi Jaitley. He is in charge of Asia Pacific and the Middle East and Africa. He's got half of the world, more chunks of the world than ever, and he's also a friend of mine. Rishi, please, are you there?
I can hear you. Can you hear me, Maria?
I can hear you. I can hear you,
Great.
Rishi. Nice to see you again. Rishi Jaitley, you're in Singapore, right?
I'm in Singapore. It's great to be back with you again. Missing Manila. Hope to be back there soon, but I am in Singapore at the moment.
Well, we hope to see you here soon. Why don't you tell us what you're seeing? So Twitter has played a great role in the Philippine elections. What are the top lines that you've seen?
Well, at a top line, I think you're right, Maria. This is definitively the first Twitter election we've seen in the Philippines. I mean, we haven't seen anything at this scale in a long time. You know, we look at a lot of elections, Maria, as you might imagine, in recent years. And at a top level, there are a few things I see. One, people power. I haven't seen an election where citizens and ordinary citizens and voters have used Twitter and social media to participate in a big way. And the tweet volumes, 35 million overall, 5 million the other day, all suggest that. Of course, we saw news organizations, including Rappler, use Twitter to break news and publish videos. And then finally, I think I would say democracy and openness and transparency, right? You referenced the voter turnout. We've done a lot of work with Comelec, a lot of irregularities being reported on Twitter. So lots of distinctive things I'm picking up from the Philippines, particularly around people power, particularly around live and video, and particularly around this idea of a more open, transparent, inclusive election.
What can you tell us more about what the people power, and do you have any numbers to show us in terms of how large exactly, how engaged were Filipinos on Twitter?
Yeah, I mean, well, you know, you look at the country, I think there are about 50 million registered voters. We observe about 48 million are on social media.
Wow,
I think if I had,
that's
yeah,
great.
And during the election from the beginning of the year, we've seen 35 million election-related tweets since the start of the year. That is an astonishing number. That is all public expression. And what's interesting, Maria, and I think you guys have a chart with the world map. One of the things we've seen is the world has been tweeting. It's not just the Philippines. And you just referenced, of course, the overseas vote. But we're seeing tweets from the United States, from Europe, from the Middle East, where I was yesterday, and the election was big news, and of course across Southeast Asia. You know, we've also seen that tweets about Duterte, he has dominated mentions both in aggregate and also that on election day itself. At about 7:30 p.m. on election day, we saw tweets about the election spike. But you know what's really cool, Maria, for those of us who care about kind of the mission that the internet affords all of us, it's tweets from ordinary citizens that are some of the most retweeted. You know, young people who are tweeting pictures of themselves or interesting infographics, or bands that are tweeting, you know, or humor, right? When the debate was delayed, there was this hashtag Durium. I think one of the things we're seeing in the Philippines more than other countries is bottoms-up sort of culture, conversation, personality is loud and clear. And I'm not surprised knowing the Philippines.
That's incredible. You know, Rishi, we actually have the map up, the global map where the Twitter conversations are going on. Could you give us an idea? So the majority of it was still coming from the Philippines.
That's right. The majority was still coming from the Philippines, but I think the places to take note, first and foremost, the Middle East. You know, there is, of course, a big expatriate population in the UAE and other countries. I myself spent a lot of time there with Twitter, and the conversation volumes have been striking. I think also the United States, of course, there's a big diaspora in the United States, and it's not surprising to see the conversation. You know, I think one of the things Twitter has done is helped the world take note of this recent spate of elections. You and I were just talking about this in Southeast Asia and Asia in general. And so this map, I think, is a powerful illustration of this was a global moment and still is a global moment as much as it is a national moment in the Philippines.
Fantastic. And you know what again was interesting about it was when you said that there are 35 million conversations. There are 54.4 million registered voters, but 81% of them came out to vote, and it looks like with the kind of engagement there was on Twitter as well, we were able to. I know that you had a hashtag PH vote with us, right? Where people, after they voted, used it. Do you have an idea how many times or how many people used it?
Well, you know, what we do know is, excuse me, what we do know is that, you know, 10% of conversation, 10% of the overall conversation happened on election day itself. 4 million tweets in one day. Again, we may be used to kind of these big numbers, particularly given how the Philippines has embraced social media. But when you take a step back and look at other countries, those are extraordinary numbers. I mean, during the presidential and vice presidential debates alone, we saw 5 million tweets combined. You know, Rappler, you all have actually have innovated in extraordinary ways on the platform, not only with the hundreds of live videos we've seen from Rappler, the emojis, of course, which you guys supported. You know, in many ways, this election represents, I think, the collective personality and purpose of the Philippines, and the data with mentions of candidates also illustrates that as well.
What role do you see Twitter playing now as the votes are being counted?
You know, it's not explicitly our business and role. A lot of people ask us, well, you know, can Twitter be predictive? Does Twitter data matter in elections context? I do think that in a country like the Philippines, we are an interesting sample size. You know, we did see that, you know, Duterte has been leading the conversation with 40% of all mentions, presidential candidate mentions, have been of him, almost as much as the next two candidates. And I think looking ahead, you know, we're obviously, as we move from Twitter for elections to Twitter in a governance context, there are all kinds of ways Twitter can be used, whether it's in the context of, he's spoken a lot about law and order. We see a lot of police organizations around the world using Twitter in really creative ways to engage citizens, whether it's our continuing work with the Election Commission, whether it's disaster relief and more. There are all kinds of ways in which to build on this momentum in the Philippines and ensure Twitter is used in a governance context in a powerful way as well. And we look forward to that opportunity in the coming months.
Well, what's interesting is you mentioned earlier that you're seeing a bottom-up approach, and that kind of bottom-up approach, strangely enough, I do think that social media played a role in getting a Duterte president, you know, because we first saw his rise and his support on social media. So what kind of impact do you see this having on democracies, not just in the Philippines, but around the world?
I think, you know, a couple of things. One, it's giving, you know, the unique attribute of Twitter, of course, is that we're public, and tweets travel. Tweets travel far and wide. And what that does is that it gives both candidates and participants alike unique power to use Twitter to shape the public conversation. And I'm sure you can think of examples during this election cycle where a conversation born on Twitter, became mainstream. In fact, in our work with the Comelec, they were encouraging people to tweet about voting irregularities. And we saw a lot of tweets, Maria, with the hashtag #SumbongKo, and they were talking about hashtag defective, or hashtag replaced, or hashtag VCM. So I think there are ways in which the unique properties of Twitter can help move conversation from the fringe to the mainstream. And I think that fundamentally, in an elections context, is what's possible. And I think in the Philippines, obviously you have news organizations and parties and candidates using Twitter. In the Philippines, I haven't seen hashtags and tweets from ordinary people see such visibility in an election cycle the way I did this last cycle in the Philippines. And but I'm not surprised, again, given the way the country's embraced social media.
Well, in some ways, you said moving from the fringe to the mainstream. That's exactly what happened to Mindanao with the presidency of Rodrigo Duterte. Let me ask you about some of the negative effects. What have you noticed is completely new, has created new problems because of this kind of bottom-up groundswell?
Well, like with any new technology, where education is imperative at the front end, we've seen folks, of course, people are passionate, people are opinionated. We see this in all elections, and it leads to a conversation sometimes that some people might find objectionable. But by and large, I think what I saw, at least, and what we saw looking at the data, looking at the conversations that were particularly viral, there was positivity, there was humor, there was personality, there was pop culture. Only in the Philippines have I seen popular local celebrities like Vice Ganda or the local band Parokya, I think, Parokya ni Edgar. Yeah, engaging in this election in an interesting way. I referenced the Durium hashtag. So I think in general, the collective personality of the Philippines shined on Twitter. Of course, there are opportunities for where people get passionate, etc. But I think in general we saw a conversation that was really positive, engaging, and we saw, the Philippines is one of our fastest growing markets, and we saw new users come to Twitter in big ways, in big droves during this election, and I suspect that'll continue.
What can we expect in the coming days from Twitter?
I think what we can expect is, as you know, in the last year, we've really taken note. We've taken note in the Philippines. I think I said when I came there last that, we've noticed that the Philippines love Twitter and we love the Philippines back. And last year, we've gone deeper in our work with news organizations, including Rappler. We've gone deep in the entertainment space, of course, with a variety of properties and more. And I think what we're going to do is the company will continue to lean in and continue to focus on, one, how can Twitter be your front row seat in a news and political context where you're experiencing governance and the conversation now in a multi-dimensional way. But, you'll see us continue to think about things like sports. You'll see us continue to think about things like entertainment. And how do we continue to onboard and ensure everyone is winning on Twitter and that the Philippines and its unique personality is shining on the platform. So stay tuned.
Fantastic. Great. Rishi, we're going to be speaking with you again. I think this, the canvas, when they actually open up the results and then try to match it with what the machines did, that begins on May 23. And then we're going to have a new president sworn in June 30th. So I'm sure we'll be speaking again. Thank you so much. Rishi Jaitley, he's coming to us live from Singapore. He runs the Middle East and Africa as well as Asia Pacific. Isn't that the whole world, Rishi?
I like to think so sometimes, but it is certainly the most interesting part of the world where I think you see a lot of innovation, a lot of energy, a lot of optimism and hope around the technologies you and I care about. So it's fun, and looking forward to being back in the Philippines.
See you soon. Thanks so much,
Thank
Rishi.
All righty.
So
bye-bye.
That's Rishi Jaitley talking to us, and we've